Hello everyone, and welcome to today's NBS webinar, the future of construction manufacturers marketing and the Construction Manufacturers Marketing Report 2022. We're delighted to be hosting this webinar today along with some great guests. This is really the first webinar we're doing where we are unveiling and talking about our brand new Construction Manufacturers Marketing Report, which has never been done before. It's the inaugural report. We launched this at the beginning of 2022 based on data that we collected at the end of 2021. And we found some really insightful information about how manufacturers in the construction industry are going about doing all aspects of their marketing. So in this first session today, we're going to be covering the high-level findings of the report, and then we're going to be having a bit of discussion around some of the key themes that it reveals. And then we'll be covering much more about it in future webinars and discussions as well. So I hope you enjoyed today's session, and I hope you get loads out of it. First of all, let me introduce today's guests. So we've got Jenny from the NBS marketing team, who is going to take us through the body of the report, and she will be taking the reins from me in a moment. I'm also delighted to introduce Ros Rowlatt from Think Tank and Joe Glover from the Marketing Meetup. So Ros, do you want to just quickly say hi and tell us a moment about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Robin. Delighted to join you all today. I'm, as I mentioned, from Think Tank. I'm head of digital media. We're a full-service marketing agency. We offer everything from PR, brand strategy, all the way through to the pointy end where I sit in digital media and performance marketing, looking after our clients' spend when they're going to market with a new product or brand, and help them determine which channel to use and for the maximum impact, and then how to benchmark what they should be achieving, and then we improve upon that. So I'm delighted to join the webinar today.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Ros. And Ros has been on NBS webinars before, so you may recognise her. But it's a first-time appearance for Joe, who we're delighted to have. Joe, who hosts the Marketing Meetup, and who many of our viewers may have seen on LinkedIn and on his own webinars. But great to have you on, Joe. And do you want to just give a quick intro?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. So my name is Joe Glover. I'm the founder of the Marketing Meetup, which is a community of some nearly 30,000 marketers across the world. Every week we get together to educate, connect, and bring marketers together, but in a way that feels really kind. That kindness is really important because we all just need to look after each other a little bit. So we have a lot of fun in the education element, and we all learn together. So anyone's very welcome to come along to one of our webinars. They're all free to attend, and a lot of fun. So yeah, please do come along. It's really nice to be here too. Brilliant.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Joe. And yeah, I could highly recommend anyone who works in marketing attending some of those sessions, because they're insightful and very warm and incredibly useful. So yeah, thanks again for joining us, Joe and Ros. So yeah, so I'm going to hand over to Jenny in just a second. So as I said, the format of the session today, Jenny's going to take us through the high-level findings of the report for 20-25 minutes or so. And then we'll get the panel back together, and we'll work through a number of key kind of questions and discussion points, and hopefully have some really insightful conversations for you. So without further ado, I will hand over to Jenny to take us through it. Over to you, Jenny.
Thanks. Hello, I'm Jenny Archer. I'm the lead researcher on this project. And as Robin mentioned, I'm just going to take you through a selection of findings from my first Construction Manufacturers Marketing Report. So before we start to look at the results, I thought it would just be useful to give a quick overview of our methodology. In doing this research, we were looking to quantify what manufacturers are doing in terms of their marketing. We used an online survey which was available for suppliers to complete between September and November last year. The survey was shared in a number of ways, including through email invitations, social media, and the NBS newsletter. And a number of our partners kindly supported us in promoting the survey. We had 166 responses from at least 136 different companies. We were really pleased with that, and in particular, the types of people who were completing it, which we'll look at in a moment. To further incentivise the survey, we offered to donate £1 for every completed survey to Charity Crash. We donated £166 to the cause as a result of this survey. Before we get into the full results, I want to look at who responded to the survey. Respondents were predominantly based in the UK, as we intended, and they weren't just NBS manufacturer partners, ensuring representation from across construction product manufacturers. In terms of their role, more than half of respondents work within the marketing area of the business. Other respondents, though not necessarily sitting directly within the marketing team, have roles that impact and work closely with them. Many were senior figures. Of those in the marketing department, 51% are marketing managers and 23% are marketing directors. Additionally, 14% of respondents overall give their role as director, partner, or owner. The respondents are those who have the insight needed to answer our questions and are those who are making the important decisions about a manufacturer's marketing and how that marketing budget is allocated and spent. As for the turnover, the most common sizes were between 2 million and 10 million, and between 10 million and 50 million. But we did have responses from the whole range of turnover sizes. We also had responses from suppliers producing a whole range of products. Building materials were the most common type of product manufactured, followed by insulation materials and roof structures and materials. The types of products that respondents produce can be broadly grouped into the 5 categories shown here. It's worth noting that respondents could tell us they produce multiple types of products, so they can fall into more than one of these broad categories. Throughout the presentation, I'll be referring back to these groupings as we look to identify any differences in experience and behaviour between the types of manufacturers. All organisation sizes were represented. The most common size was those employing between about 101 and 250 employees. Respondents tend to work within small marketing teams. 29% tell us that they're the sole person responsible for marketing. And in a small percentage of cases, there appears to be no dedicated marketing team. When we compared results between the different types of product manufacturer, there is a suggestion that companies who produce fenestration products and equipment tend to be smaller and as a result employ less people within the marketing team. So I'd like to start by looking at the tools and resources that respondents are using to support their marketing. On the left, as you look at it, are those tools that respondents use to help manage their product information. You can see that most continue to use PDF documents followed by spreadsheets. We know that poses a risk. PDF documents quickly go out of date, which can lead to customers using out-of-date information. Use of a PIM remains low, less than a quarter tell us they use one. The people using one tend to work in higher turnover companies. That's not a surprise. It can be a big investment both in time and money to invest in a PIM system. On the right are some of the main systems that respondents can use to manage their marketing. Social media tools and email systems are most used, but the use of marketing automation software lags behind the other tools. Using such tools can help to streamline business processes and improve efficiency. I'd now like to consider respondents' marketing budgets and how that's allocated to different channels. This really was a key area that we wanted to explore. We wanted to understand more about what these are and how they are spent. We found surprisingly low marketing budgets. Over half of respondents tell us it's less than 100,000. And despite the number of larger suppliers, less than 10% have a budget of more than 1 million. When you compare the budget according to the type of product manufactured, you see an indication of some differences. Those producing fenestration products and equipment tend to have some of the smallest budgets, likely a reflection of them generally being smaller organisations. Whilst those producing interior fixtures and fittings tend to have larger budgets, that's perhaps a reflection of both the choice that's available in that area, and they are often the products that are much more visible in the final building, meaning that the designer and client might be more concerned about ensuring that they get it right and might therefore spend more time and potentially money looking for the right product. We wanted to explore this budget further and look at how the marketing budget compared to turnover and whether suppliers were spending proportionately enough on their marketing. Marketing budgets are often set as a proportion of sales or turnover, but what proportion of turnover should they be? We looked at a few sources, and in 2019-20, business-to-business manufacturing marketing budgets in both North America and the UK were estimated to be about 10.4%. Further American research in 2021 suggested that those budgets had fallen further to between around 2.4% and 3%, depending on whether you're looking at manufacturing or the construction industry. There's also a suggestion by some that there's a general rule of thumb that companies should aim to spend between 2 and 5% of their sales on marketing. Using the midpoint of the bandings that respondents chose to tell us their turnover and marketing budget, we calculated the average marketing budget by turnover for our results. That gives us an average marketing budget of 2.3% of turnover, so similar to the predictions from the 2021 American research. But we did find wide variation. Some spend less than 1%, whilst others spend over 35%. It is expected that you'll see some variation. For example, established companies can tend to set their marketing budget lower than new companies, as they're much more well known in the market. But would you expect to see that much variation? The chart shown here shows the marketing budget by turnover, with an expected marketing budget of 2 to 5% of turnover highlighted. Here we see that it's the larger turnover companies, those with turnovers of 10 to 50 million, and in particular over 50 million, who are spending less than expected on their marketing. For just over half of respondents, their budgets have remained static in recent years. That's a particular issue for those companies with the highest turnover. The percentage of respondents with a turnover of over 50 million, whose marketing budget has remained the same, increases to 67%. Their budgets are lagging behind, and perhaps partially explains why they are spending proportionately less than others. Positively, for a third of suppliers, their budgets have increased even with COVID and other uncertainties affecting the industry. As many of you will know, there are broadly 3 types of marketing channel. Traditional, which is often print-based, such as direct mail posted to you. Digital, so many of the online channels such as email, content marketing, digital adverts and the like. And then what we've termed as construction tailored, such as your digital object libraries, product libraries, and project lead services. We wanted to understand how marketing budgets were being split between these areas. Just over half of respondents' marketing activity is digital, but traditional marketing still has a place. On average, 29% of the budget is allocated to such activity. The rest of the budget, around 18%, is spent on the more construction-tailored channels. Looking in more detail at the channels used, you start to see 3 groups emerging. Those channels that are used frequently by at least 3/4 of respondents, those that are regularly used by around half of respondents, and then the third group that are used less often and at a lower frequency. In the first category, we see universal use of websites and social media. That's not a surprise. You expect companies to use a website to promote and sell their products. Brochures or catalogues remain important. The digital version is frequently used by 4 out of 5 respondents, and the printed version by half of them. But past research has found that use of these by those using construction product information, such as your architects and engineers, is lower. 96% of respondents use content marketing, but only around half use it a lot or often. Content marketing is a useful tool, as we've seen by some of respondents' comments and also our own experience, but it's something that takes time to produce. In the lower use category are a number of the more traditional channels, such as direct mail. Event marketing is also in this group. In part, that could be a reflection of COVID limiting the number of in-person events. It's clear that higher turnover companies have more scope in their channel use. Their larger budget and often resource in the marketing team mean that they appear to be more likely to invest in both digital and print advertising, events, and direct mail. We asked respondents about the importance of the more construction-tailored channels. They are all important. The majority see product libraries or data platforms and CPD as important, especially your MEP manufacturers. And many also see project lead services such as Glenigan important. 2 out of 3 respondents consider your digital object libraries important, especially those in higher turnover companies. So how do manufacturers measure the effectiveness of their marketing? Well, the key metric they use is the traffic to their website. Again, this isn't surprising. We saw universal usage of the website as a marketing channel, and many of the other channels will also use the call to action to direct people to the manufacturer's website. The number of leads generated and views our information gets is also important for many, both in terms of the number of views and the number of downloads. Less than 6 out of 10 tell us that they look at the number of times they're specified. We would expect that more would like to do that, but they find it difficult. Construction-tailored marketing channels can help here, and it allows it to be done a little bit more easily through the likes of our add to spec button. Fewer consider the cost of acquiring a new customer and how much they will pay over the years that they are a customer. They're some of the more difficult things to measure, but they can be useful and are used more in some other industries. We wanted to briefly consider perceptions of marketing in the sector generally. We presented 4 statements to respondents and asked them how strongly they agreed or disagreed with them. Marketing in the industry doesn't stand out compared to other sectors. Less than a quarter agree that it's generally of a high standard when compared to other areas, and only 4% told us that they strongly agree with that statement. Less than half agree that marketing within the construction industry is respected. Positively though, things have improved. 2 out of 3 respondents agree that the construction marketing sector is stronger than it was 5 years ago. And nearly 9 out of 10 believe that marketing will be more important to their business in the future. Hopefully that improvement in perceptions will help ensure that the marketing teams get the budgets and resources that they need. There are challenges though. When asked to identify their 3 main barriers to marketing, respondents' main issue is around resourcing. 55% cite limited in-house marketing resources, whilst others also highlight the available budget and skills shortages within the marketing team as issues. The skills they are short on are often the digital skills. The ability to demonstrate return on investment is also a barrier for 43% of respondents. It's also worth noting that 1/3 of respondents highlight managing product information as a main barrier to their marketing. Yet we saw earlier many continuing to use PDF documents and spreadsheets to do this. The data suggests that fenestration product and equipment manufacturers are more likely to cite this as an issue. So what can we expect from construction product manufacturers or suppliers in the future? Well, it's clear that there is a changing marketing landscape. 89% expect their approach to marketing to change in the next 3 to 5 years. 51% think that it will change a bit, and 38% a lot. How do they expect things to change? Well, primarily they expect a continuing shift to digital. And some also expect that they will start to try new things, both in terms of the channels they offer and the content that they offer. Finally, we look at what macro trends respondents believed would influence their marketing in the next 3 to 5 years, and whether they expected that influence to be positive or negative. The main positive influences are expected to be increased digitalisation and sustainability, whilst the ongoing materials shortage is likely to be the key negative influence. We see a greater uncertainty over the type of influence respondents expect the changing building regulations and the Code for Construction Product Information to have, though positively just 3% think that they will have a negative influence. Your small organisations with up to around 15 employees seem more likely to be concerned about the possibility of Brexit having a negative impact on their marketing. So what does all that mean? Well, it's clear that the construction marketing landscape is changing. Resourcing is a particular issue, especially in the form of marketing budgets. And respondents also tell us that their marketing teams are missing the necessarily digital skills and expertise. To manage their product information, many continue to rely on PDF documents and spreadsheets, despite a third believing that effectively managing their product information is a barrier to effective marketing. That poses a risk. Use of marketing automation software is low. Increasing its use would help improve efficiency and in turn help address some of the resourcing issues. Digital channels are used most often, but traditional channels still have a place, and construction tailored channels are an important part of the marketing mix. Respondents are positive about the future though. Many think that marketing in the sector is improving, and they expect their own marketing to change for the better in the next few years. Positive influences are expected to be increased digitalisation and sustainability, but challenges are expected to continue in the form of material shortages. I've only had time to provide you with a brief overview of the results today, but there is more detail included in the full report. So if you haven't already done so, please do visit our website to download it. And now I'll pass you back to Robin.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed for that, Jenny. That was really useful to go through, and a great summary of findings of what is a very detailed report. So as Jenny mentioned there, please do get onto the website and download it in full. So at this point, we've brought the panel back in. So thanks for joining again, guys. So we've got a number of kind of discussion points that we're going to work through, and we'll see how the discussion goes. So first question I wanted to put to the panel. Let's start with the big stuff really. And the first question I put is: are construction product manufacturers investing correctly in marketing? And now, obviously, there was some stuff covered about budget in the report, and that's obviously one important aspect. But I think the other side of it is whether they're really giving it the care and attention and focus that it needs. I think particularly when you look compared to other industries that are spending 8, 10, 12% of their turnovers on marketing, our report says it's 2.3% amongst construction manufacturers, so arguably not very much. So who wants to start us off with this one?
I'm happy to chip in.
Yeah, do you want to go?
Probably a slightly contrarian point of view. So hopefully it doesn't ruin things too early on.
Not at all.
Which is, I generally don't have the belief that it should be a percentage figure of revenue that is invested into a final budget for a marketing budget. The reason I say that is that that figure gives you a thing that is very easy to produce, which is really great from a sort of a financial planning perspective, but actually doesn't actually represent the investment that you would like to make in marketing. So say, for example, your target is to grow 10% year on year, and the last year you were able to grow 5% year on year. You know, like, is a proportionate figure going to be, you know, that increasing by a proportion of your revenue is going to be the correct figure? Probably not, because you're not linking that to activity. So for me, the starting place for any marketer wanting to create a budget that matters is really knowing what you want to do. And by knowing what you want to do, then you can start associating a budget with that. That also helps marketers tell the story that they want to tell, which is, you know, these are the things that I would like to do at the moment, and therefore, you know, let me take you on that journey. Let me tell you, Mr. or Mrs. board member, these are the things I'd like to do. This is the story, and this is what I think I'll get at the end. Personally, I find that a far more effective way and a more detailed way to sort of justify marketing spend in a way that makes sense to people, rather than just spitting out something based on a random calculation on a spreadsheet.
Interesting. Ros, what's your take on that?
Well, I was seeing it from a sort of giant with a finance hat on. When they're making plans, you've got to start somewhere, haven't you? And if you know that something works and needs investment, then of course you've got the case to argue for more investment. But I think one of the things that struck out at me from the report was about the difference that Jenny found in marketing budget between 1 and I think it was 35%, was it, of turnover. So there's a huge difference in this country in what the industry is spending on marketing. So I think that is more of a interesting question. And is it because of the economic situation, Brexit, etc., that there are such varying levels of investment in marketing? And then I'd go as far as to say, well, when they are investing in marketing, is it just traditional marketing, or is marketing a fundamental part of the business? Is it a marketing-led organisation, or is it still a traditionally sales-led or operationally led organisation? So they're the other questions I would ask of those companies spending 1% or spending 35% of their turnover.
It's interesting that you should mention that about the traditional led. The word definitely comments from some respondents that suggested that their business had been very traditional in approach and very sales-led in the past.
Yeah.
And that they were now at a bit of a turning point where they were starting to see much more marketing having a more important role in the business. And moving forward, we might see that that does actually change and marketing does become much more important to them.
How, out of curiosity, I mean, when you say traditionally led, what do you mean by that? I mean, what would that sort of entail for you guys? Because I guess that's an interesting question to sort of follow through on.
For me, it would be non-digital, traditional print, etc.
I think that there's a perception that the construction industry has traditionally always worked on brochures, catalogues, and buying people a pint at an event, and that's how a lot of marketing has traditionally got done. And there's certainly some truth in that up to recent times. But every time we speak to manufacturers, what we hear back is we want to do more digital. We want to go more digital, and that has come through in the survey comments. But when you look at the results, there's still a good slice of budgets being spent on more traditional channels, which I think we'll come to. Actually, we've got a specific question on this one in a moment, so maybe we'll hold some of those thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the interesting things about it is how folks are choosing to manage the effectiveness of their marketing campaigns. So right now you're seeing stuff like lifetime value right down the bottom. You're seeing cost of acquisition right down the bottom in your survey. And those things are really interesting because, of course, if you're able to manage those things, you're able to have a conversation where you're saying, actually, you know what, we can bring in a customer for £100,000 because we know they're going to spend £300,000 over the lifetime of the contract on average. That feels like a really strong position to be in. And it sort of loops back around to where I was starting with the conversation about budgeting, in that if you know that you're going to spend £100,000 on the acquisition of a customer, then you're able to have, that conversation about, well, we would like to have 20 new customers this year, so we're going to need £2 million this year for our budget, and that's probably the way that I prefer to do it. And therefore the measurement of marketing seems like a really, really interesting place to come from in this particular question. Are we investing it correctly? Well, it doesn't actually feel like we're measuring it correctly to start off with. So therefore, how can we budget appropriately either?
Yeah, I think that, wow, there's so much to unpack in all of that. I think, first point around that, it's horses for courses to an extent, isn't it? So in a small startup or scale up high growth organization, maybe 20, 30, 35% spend on marketing is more the norm, versus where margins are much tighter and it's more of an established player in the market. You'd expect to see it at a smaller level. Sorry, Joe, what do you want to say?
Sorry, well, just to add a statistic to it, then one of the sort of main contributing factors to organizational effectiveness on spend is how large an organization is, exactly to your point. And the biggest outweighing sort of factor that comes into how effective your spend is indeed the size of the company. And it's actually somewhere between an 8 and 18x multiple of effectiveness on spend, which means to say if you're a big company, then your $1 will go 8 times further than a small company, which is also a reason for these smaller organizations to be investing more, because there is that sort of statistical proof that, you know, to escape the sort of being a small company forever, you need to be spending an awful lot more than the big competition out there.
That's interesting, yeah, because we have some within those results, we have some very large multinational organizations who have large budgets and large teams. We also have some of those scale-ups that are less well known from a brand point of view and are trying to gain market share. And you know, they often ask us how they can get more exposure and build that. And I think it's a really interesting point there to show that, you know, that brand equity in the marketplace counts for a lot in terms of, you know, driving more return on investment for each marketing pound spent.
Absolutely, 100%. It's really interesting. I love it.
Ros, what about the emotional investment? So, you know, forgetting about the cost side of things for a moment, in terms of buy-in from the top of the organization down to really believe in what marketing is, and that it's not just necessarily about pages in a magazine or ads on a website. It's about telling stories and getting results.
Yeah, and I think some of the stats in the report that Jenny covered about, you know, a lot of the companies that responded would have one marketing person. So how does one marketing person lead the charge against the rest of the organization and get everybody eating, sleeping and breathing marketing? So it tells a story that I think that marketing isn't taken as seriously as it should be on the whole, and that you know, it tells a story that we're not putting marketing first. It's the chicken or the egg. You know, is it sales first, then with your profits you then market, or do you have to generate the sale through marketing first? So yeah, I think it very much focuses on that a lot of organizations are very much sales led still and don't believe that marketing should come before sales.
Yeah, and Joe, just on that before we move on to the next question, you know, how in B2B sales led organizations where it's all about, you know, getting spec'd and shifting product, how can marketing make sure that it's on the agenda of the kind of top table and get that buy-in?
My perception is that we have to speak the language of the rest of the organization. So it's a little bit like going to a foreign country. You know, it's a really respectful thing to do, to try and speak the other folks' language. So for me, if I was going to France, I'd try my best to speak French. If I was speaking to my CFO, I would try to speak in finance. And at the end of the day, the language of business is finance, whether we like it or not. That doesn't mean to say that, you know, and there's a growing sort of trend within the marketing sphere that we should be measuring our activities based on revenue. Whether all that's right or wrong, I don't know. But what that means to say is that our activities should be spoken about in financial terms. That doesn't mean to say that we need to be basing every one of our single activities with an ROI figure next to it. I don't think that's correct, because there is a bunch of stuff, as Ros said earlier, which is in the quote unquote dark funnel that will be very, very hard to measure. But as the cumulative effort of all of our efforts, you know, we should be able to turn around and sort of say the revenue we've generated or the leads that we've passed on or whatever it is that is measured inside the company, this has impacted the company in X way, and therefore we justify our efforts that way. And they go, I get it.
We get it.
Yeah, and there's a second element to that, which is layering in these sort of financial figures is also the storytelling element, you know, which we love to speak about as marketers, which is, you know, I did this thing for this reason, you know, and sort of taking them on that journey and sort of saying it's justified for this reason. And I really thought it would be a great idea. So that's why we invested this money there. Having that conversation and being open and honest and human with these discussions, rather than sort of just presenting a cell on a spreadsheet and saying, give me the money. That's the way that we sort of get that legitimacy within business.
Brilliant. So I'm hearing a bit of finance and a bit of storytelling is the possibly a good combination.
And then it's also the way we talk about the marketplace. We call it business to business, but actually it's business to person, because it's still a person at the end of the day that's making the decision. And we shouldn't be just thinking of the business is blind, but we have to realize that all of our marketing efforts have to appeal to a person. So I think we're going to get onto that in terms of where the market's going, but I think in terms of the marketing efforts that we make, with the changes in digital for cookie policies, as we talked about before, I think first touch marketing and being able to tell a story is becoming ever more important now, because you have to engage your audience on the first touch as a marketer, and not rely on cookies to bring those people back to your site. So I think that will feed into that question about the threats that are approaching us.
Absolutely. Well, we'll come on to that in a bit more, I'm sure. So next one is another slightly loaded question. Is there enough focus on digital? And the reason I ask this is because, again, it's quite hard actually to determine non-digital from digital activities in the modern era. So, PR, is it digital or non-digital? Because actually a lot of PR ends up online, but it's still in some ways a traditional media activity. Likewise, you could say that a PDF brochure is that a digital or a physical format, because it has a lot of the limitations of physical format, being that once it's done and it's hard to update, but it appears in a digital form. So it's a slightly loaded question, but I would say that there is that contradiction that I mentioned earlier, whereby continuously the manufacturers tell us they want to focus more on digital, and particularly get their organizations more engaged with the way they do digital marketing. But actually, they still invest a lot of activity and time and money on what would be traditional non-digital channels. So, what interested in what you guys think about this, and how the industry maybe moves on and catches up with some of the other industries out there.
Yeah, from my point of view, I'm all digital, but I can see that a lot of our clients still are doing the traditional non-digital, which are still digital activities, and they're really important, because I don't think as we know as marketeers, one type of campaign won't be a success on its own, and has to be supported by other types of campaign. So the more that you can involve digital in your non-digital activities, and the more that you can involve non-digital in your digital activities, I think is the case. That you shouldn't assume that just being digital is going to wash its face on its own. It's going to need support. PR, for example, which crosses those boundaries, as you just mentioned, because PR can bring people to your site. It can help support with SEO, and then also help with sales. So it's as a traditionally non-digital route, but it is actually, on the face of it, hugely digital. So I think there is definitely from our clients in the construction sector a real focus on digital. But if you look at the marketplace, there probably is room for growth.
I think that's a really great answer, Ros. So I think it's a really unuseful distinction that folks bring into marketing, to say digital versus traditional. Personally, it's all just marketing, and at the end of the day, whether it's a handwritten letter, a carrier pigeon, or a PPC ad, it doesn't matter so long as it works. I think Ros suggested something really sensible there, which was bringing in elements of both. So for example, on your printed material, you might put a QR code on, and then you can start to measure some stuff. That seems like a really sensible thing to do. But actually, I guess really to answer the question directly, is there enough focus on digital? From my perspective, there's almost too much focus on digital, because it's not really the thing you should be focusing on. The thing you should be focusing on is producing marketing results, however they come and however they are produced. And that includes digital based activity, but we could stop having that conversation and have a more productive conversation about marketing in general. And that sort of feels like a safer place to go, and one that is slightly less confusing, because to have this discussion implies one is better than the other. They're not, it's just marketing. The one caveat I will give to that is that if your website really, really, really looks rubbish, then there is a reputational sort of like hygiene sort of thing to that. So there is like hygiene levels of digital that we should be focusing on to make sure that we're reaching that sort of benchmark of acceptability. But then after that point, it's all about doing the things that work rather than being really digital. You could be 100% digital and still run a terrible marketing department, in the same way as you could be 100% traditional and be really, really great.
Yeah, I think really eloquently answered both there, pushing on the same door, which is that, yeah, exactly. It's I don't want to say horses for courses again, but it's about getting the right stories and the right content out to the right people that are going to make an impression and drive a result. And sometimes that may be through one channel, and sometimes it may be through another, and they may or may not be a mix of digital. Mm-hmm. I guess the only comeback to that would be, for those organizations where digital marketing is on their agenda, how do we then move them beyond that way of thinking and into that mode of thinking that we've just talked about there, of worrying less about the medium and more about the kind of the outcomes?
Well, it's down to measurement as well. I think the impact of digital has made us more measurable, and made activity more measurable. So therefore, I would say that if you can include digital in your traditional marketing, whether it's UTM codes or some way of tracking back your activity, then it can be measured and you get proof of concept. So yeah, I think measurement would probably come before the focus on digital. I think it's focused on measurement. How can you prove the success of what you've been doing, and once you can, then you can grow in that medium.
Yeah, the only thing I have to add to that is probably even one step further back almost. So I'll be retreating back into my living room in a minute, which is about strategy. So at the end of the day, the things that you need to be knowing are, who are the people that you want to be targeting? What is the message that is going to resonate with these people? And what is the goal that you're trying to achieve? And so if you know those three things, and you can start to build a strategy that builds some consistency into your messaging, and then the messaging informs which channels you choose. It becomes quite a natural choice at that point. I think what you're doing, if we start speaking about channels at the beginning, saying we need to do more SEO, it's like, why? Does that fit our strategy? Does that fit the goals? So let's take a step back, appreciate what we're trying to do and who we're trying to do it for and what we want to say to them. Then we can build in the channels, and that's a more strategic view on the whole thing. But and that absolutely includes measurement, as Ros very rightly says. So yeah, I'd just make sure that we have a strategy. For anyone who wants to look into that further, then I'd really recommend a chap called Mark Ritson, who is a marketing professor. He has 3 stages of marketing: diagnosis, strategy, and tactics. The thing that we're speaking about here, the channels, is the tactical element, and it's the bit that comes last. So do the first 2 stages first. Tactics last.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with that enough. So diagnose the problem, work out what the right solution is to it, and then work out how you're going to execute it.
Absolutely. And
I'm sure there's plenty of listeners on the line who maybe find their organisations are guilty of ready, fire, aim tactics.
By the way, I was guilty of that. I was an extremely mediocre marketer for at least the first 5 years of my career, and it's because exactly. And I know the frustration of it, and it's hard, because if you're just doing things, and you're not measuring it, or you haven't got a reason why, then it becomes extremely frustrating and really hard.
Yeah.
So actually taking a step back and getting that alignment across the team, it's really important. It'll make everyone's life a lot easier.
or that saying of repeating the same activity expecting a different result.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Well, loads more on that. So yeah, we should maybe we should do another. I think we've done some sessions on marketing strategy before, so please check them out. And I'm sure there's a few on the Marketing Meetup as well, Joe, that are relevant to that.
Yeah, many hundreds.
Good. I'll move us on to the next one. So one of the big things that came up on the survey was around challenges with resource. So more around internal resource than budget. So what can manufacturers do to make the most of a small team that they've got and maybe limited skills and expertise in-house? How can they make sure they're getting the most bang for buck, I guess, with what they've got?
Well, I think people and budget. Sorry, Joe, if you go before me.
Go for it.
About the people and budget. It's knowing exactly what Joe was saying before. What's your strategy? Who's your audience? And how you're going to find them. I think you start with your existing client base, see how you get the most out of them to begin with, and then look for new, and how you do engage them. So then, therefore, you match your marketing people and budgets accordingly. That's what I do. But I'm sure Joe will have a better opinion on this.
Not at all. Not at all. No, I think limited resources is everywhere, right? And I think based on your data, it was 79% had a team up to 5 people, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Which is not a lot at all, especially for multi-million-pound organizations. So there's an awful lot to do. So what can you do to make the most of your resource? Well, if it's budget and you're a fairly small organization, then you're going to have to be doing things that other folks can't do. Be punching above your weight, So, for example, a large organization is very unlikely to sit down in their office one day and write out 100 handwritten letters to potential prospects, because you know what? Why would they? They're the big company, and that seems really hard. So as a smaller organization, you could say, you know what, we're going to take the prerogative and we're going to do something highly personalized and something that matters, something that feels personal and will resonate with the audience. That is something that a larger organization wouldn't do, but a small has the ability to, and the agility to. You're doing things that really matter, the things that quote unquote don't scale. So that would be my first protocol, is like, can you amplify your voice in such a way that is creative and original, but also personal? Those are the things that I'd be thinking about if I was small in terms of budget.
Yeah.
If I was thinking small in terms of people, then there's a reality, which is just one of prioritization, and we have to realize that as a marketer, our role is one of marketing both internally and externally. So you're going to have to be supremely good at communication and understanding the things that your boss wants, and needs from the organization, and be able to communicate that to them. And that goes for large organizations as well. But, if this is going to be a big time drain, then you're going to have to focus on that.
Yeah.
After that, I think it is just about picking the channels that quote unquote work. Let's not get lost in the digital conversation again. Let's focus on the things that work from a marketing perspective. And that comes through experimentation. And again, that is justified by the storytelling and the financial conversations that we were speaking about at the beginning. It all comes full circle, I guess.
It does, yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree with all of that. And, maybe the other one to think about as well is, if you've got limited in-house resource, pick and choose the agencies and partners that you work with really well, and build up some really strong relationships there. That, my experience of working with agencies is when you get it really working well, they become an extension of your team, and it just magnifies everything and improves it. versus, you know, a poor relationship can just be a drain on budget and not achieve anything.
Absolutely, 100%. No, I couldn't agree more. If your marketing manager can sit in the middle and act like a sort of hub to the spokes of the agency,
yeah,
that's a really great way of doing it. So very, very good point. Yeah.
Outsourcing is definitely an option here, though I don't believe I covered it in this overview, but around 70% do marketing in-house and only around 30% tell us that they outsource it.
Yeah.
Looking at that in some more detail, some of the comments really suggest that they're not actually allowed by their senior management to do outsourcing. So I think there is some issues there that also need to be addressed.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe that's one to explore further.
Well, I suppose it's seen as expensive, but you know, is it more expensive than the cost of another person?
Exactly. Right, I'm going to move us on because we don't have loads of time left and still a couple more questions to get through. But yeah, we kind of touched this a little bit with the last one, but you know, this is affecting all areas of the economy at the moment. I mean, not to use the D word again particularly, but all types of digital skills, quote unquote, are in demand. But how can manufacturers, you know, manage those skill shortages? And other than what we've said already, you know, is there anything extra they can do here to fill those roles and bring in those skills around marketing that they might struggle with and need to be very competitive with from a recruitment point of view? Joe, what are you seeing in this area from you know, from the marketing meetup and the wider industry?
So the wider industry demand for marketing roles is up about a third year on year right now, and salaries are up to 50% year on year in some roles as well. So there's a massive demand for folks, and the supply is not there. So you know, I guess this can be a very short answer really, because the obvious answer is invest in the people that you have. You know, make them as good as you possibly can be. There is absolutely no justification for not training your staff, particularly those who turn around and say, but what if they leave? That is the worst argument in the world. So invest in your staff, you know, and by all means, look for folks. There are some out there, people are looking, but for the most part, everyone's suffering. Everyone's trying to find these people. So I think it's better to turn inward than rely solely on outward.
I totally agree, and it's a philosophy that we have at the think tank is we like to train and educate the people we already have rather than look outside to bring in, because I think it goes through the whole organization. If you can see there's development of team members in particular departments, then it boosts morale. And that general feeling then across the business, just, you know, it's something that can't be bought. But, you know, conversely, then, you know, if you do have a shortage and perhaps you're not located where there is, you know, such access to the labour market, like a major city, then, you know, maybe the only option then is to outsource. But yeah, I totally agree with Joe that we should definitely look inside the business first before going outside.
And it's I'm really glad you brought up outsourcing again there, Ros, because it's a really great point. And like it shocks me actually that folks would have a blanket policy on not outsourcing. It shouldn't be there, because there's so much phenomenal talent that has sort of gone freelance particularly over these past 2 years with folks seeking out work-life balance. So honestly, you know, if that is a policy, then it's one worth looking at, because
let's look into that more, Jenny, and see what the data says, and see if there's some work we could do around that, because yeah, I agree, it seems, especially in the current climate, completely self-defeating.
Spot on.
Good. Right, some very, very clear answers there, which I think was really great. Thank you on that one. So this one's a bit of a biggie as well, and you know, what can manufacturers learn from other industries, particularly construction manufacturers? And Joe, this is probably your first introduction to or maybe one of your first introductions to the unique world of construction marketing. But you know, construction is traditionally known as one of the least digitized you know, overall. I don't just mean in marketing, but compared to all industries. And if you look at the marketing that happens in construction versus, say, retail, e-commerce, or travel, or anything like that, it does appear to be, a bit behind. What are your thoughts from what you've seen on what, very high level, what construction can learn from other industries?
Well, based on the synopsis and some of the highlights that we got from the report, then speed does seem like a word that comes to mind. If indeed antiquated is another word that is associated with the construction industry, then a little bit of movement and openness to change is a great thing. That being said, there's, I guess, one of the key learnings and one of the most shocking things that I saw from the report was the measurement thing and how folks are measuring success. And industry such as the software as a service, SaaS industry, is incredibly good at sort of measuring success based on cost per acquisition, lifetime value and stuff like that. So for me, that's one element that feels like it could be do with a little bit of a look at. Layered into that is the view on digital. But I think when you get your measurement correct, then you're able to tell a story of your efforts equaling X rather than equaling question mark. And that doesn't mean to say that you can measure every pound, because there is that perception out there that marketers can do that, and I don't think that is true. But I do think there's something about measurement as well. So speed and measurement, openness to change, and a general willingness to sort of engage with marketing, quote unquote, the right way, I guess.
Brilliant. Yeah. Ros, what about from your point of view?
Yeah, working in some other sectors, I'd say that some of the major differences would be in terms of measurement, but also seeing what the tolerance is in the market. So, for example, going to market with a new software product, but knowing the size of your market. So sort of that sort of researching your market, knowing how large that market is, or what that market does, and being able to target based on that knowledge, I think is a really great tactic to meet your strategy for acquisition or whatever your strategy is. From the clients that we work with, in terms of another tactic, using marketing automation, I think, and having a full circle approach, that anybody that comes to the website and engages with you becomes part of a nurture program. You can never escape them, but I think that is something that I think there's in the UK. I think maybe only 50% of B2B businesses use any kind of marketing automation. So
yeah, it was a very low number in the survey as well. What was it, Jenny? You got that to hand? It was a small percentage anyway. Much lower than 50%.
I think it was around a quarter.
Yeah.
There you go.
So yeah, I would say that would be something they could learn from other industries. The success that well-managed marketing automation can bring, although that's an investment in itself. So and having somebody managing that. So yeah, that's what I would say is a really useful tool.
Brilliant. Okay, so much we could talk about in that, but we must move on. So final question, and this is really about some of the kind of the macro stuff. What factors will influence marketing in construction in the next 12 months? Obviously, there's various regulations and things like that, which we'll probably cover in other sessions. But clearly, there are a few things highlighted in the report, from Brexit to skills and labour shortages, all those side of things. Joe, if I can come back to you, what are the big picture things that marketers need to be considering about for the next 12 months and making sure that they're accommodating in their strategies?
I think we've got a challenge at the moment that we probably haven't seen since the 80s in marketing, in society in general, which is inflation.
Yeah.
And right now, if you're doing marketing correctly, then the marketer will have a part to say on what our pricing strategy is, how much we are pricing things for, and go from there. For the most part, it's far easier to start with a price that starts high and then goes lower. But actually, the challenge that we're going to be seeing over the next 12 months is, in order to protect our margin and remain profitable as businesses, then we're going to have to be rising prices. To justify that to the customer when you're saying this product costs £5 this year and £10 next is an incredibly difficult thing to do, aside from doing the shrug of your shoulders and sort of saying it is what it is. So I think folks need to be taken on that journey, and it's one that is handled with honesty and authenticity, and sort of saying, you know what, our supply chain has been impacted by X. We're not making any more profit on this, but unfortunately the cost is now Y because of this. It's one of these things that, as I say, because inflation hasn't been this high for so long, and it probably will be for the next couple of years, then it's a mad challenge for folks to justify these sort of increases in costs. So it's a real communications job for marketers to sort of get their head around this and justify to their audiences why their bill is going to be rapidly expanding over this next period.
And then similarly, there'll be the supply questions as well, because some of our clients in this sector have difficulty in supply, for example, with lintels, getting the steel. So supply and cost increases are going to, they're beyond the company's control. They're part of your SWOT analysis. You know that this is coming, so maybe you change your pricing model. You go on to not a unit price, or you're part of a partnership, so that when you do have supply problems, you're not going to lose your customer. That's one side of things. Another side of things is back to measurement again. And I mentioned before about cookie policy. It's going to impact the way all digital marketers work, because we can't rely on cookies to tell us where people have been anymore. Google will be removing third-party cookies this year, and we have to figure out how to work without them. And I think that makes marketers happy, I think, because it leaves it down to creativity rather than the numbers. So people enter marketing because they have, the creativity, and they want to engage their audience through storytelling. And that's going to be more important than the numbers, because we won't be able to rely on the data giving us the full story, because I'm already seeing it from some of our clients who have very strict cookie policies on their sites, that we lose up to 80% of the data going through. So therefore, we can't rely on the numbers. So therefore, we have to rely on how we engage in order to bring them in as customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So there's both macro challenges there at an economic level and at a marketing tactical level that marketers are going to have to navigate through in the months ahead. So yeah, I think it's, we've had a couple of years that are unlike anything else that we've ever seen, and for slightly different but related reasons, that looks set to continue. And we need to be ready to deal with change and uncertainty and manage our way through it.
Absolutely.
What was that? Sorry, Joe.
I was just going to take the mic and say I thought you were going to say unprecedented there, so I'm glad you avoided that.
Not quite.
I'm sure
every year is unprecedented, but
yeah. I'm sure Jenny had something more substantive and useful to say.
I was going to say that I think we have to bring digitalization back into the mix here as well. We saw that 84% of manufacturers thought that would have a big impact, generally positive, in the next 3 to 5 years. And if you also look at the people they're communicating with, the specifiers, they tell us in our digital construction survey that many of them are on a digital transformation journey. 7 out of 10 of them think that COVID has accelerated that digitalization. It's something that manufacturers have to take into account.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Well, I'm afraid we're pretty much out of time. I felt like we could carry on all afternoon with various themes and topics that have come out of that report. But yeah, I just want to say a huge thank you to the panel, and thanks to Ros and Joe for joining us and bringing all of their wisdom and expertise. Thanks, Jenny, for pulling the report together and presenting it so eloquently there. And thanks to our viewers for joining in and listening. If you haven't downloaded the full report, you can go on manufacturers.thenbs.com. It's completely free to download. You know, we've put it out there to really play back to the industry what the industry's doing in this respect. And like I said, we don't think there's anything else out there that quite captures it in the same way. So we hope that it provides useful and makes a difference. So thanks again to the panel. Thanks for everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Thanks.
Cheers then. Bye-bye.
Bye.